Sveiki visi, prisijungę, ačiū, kad prisijungėte. Pradedam šiandienos webinarą, tiksliau webinaro ciklą, kas toliau kibernetinio saugumo srityje. Ir pradėsime pirmojų webinarų šiandien Turning Data into Knowledge. Turim svečiuose Tapio Väärämäki iš distribucijos Exclusive Networks. Hi, Tapio. Tapio.
Hi, good morning.
Sekundėlę ir dalinuosi prezentaciją. Iš tikrųjų, paskutiniu metu kartais jau sulaukiam klausimų iš klientų, kas toliau kibernetinio saugumo srityje, taip pavadintas ir mūsų seminarų ciklas. Tai yra, rinka iš tikrųjų yra pakankamai pribrendusi ir dauguma klasikinių sprendimų nemaža dalis klientų turi ir iš tikrųjų kyla klausimai, kaip toliau gerinti savo saugumą ir didinti tą sieną. Tai yra dvi grupės žmonių, tame tarpe greičiausiai ir jūs, kurie mato grėsmes skirtingai. Vieni tai mato labiau kaip vidinių įsilaužėlių arba vidinių nelojalių darbuotojų grėsmes, vadinamų insideriais. Kiti labiau mato tai kaip įsilaužėlius internete, outsideriais, tai tie, kas labiau mato grėsmes išorėje, kaip taisyklė labiau orientuoti į perimetro apsaugą, į ugnesines, web aplikacijų ugnesines, saugią nuotolinę prieigą, apsaugą nuo paslaugų sutrikdymo, elektroninio pašto apsauga arba viešosios debesų kompiuterijos apsaugos sprendimai daugiausia domina. Tai antrieji ir ypatingai dažniausiai būna didelės organizacijos, sako, kad mūsų pagrindinės grėsmės yra vidiniai insideriai, vidiniai darbuotojai. Tai šitoj apsaugos sprendimų pusėje yra įvairios technologijos, tiek SIEM tipo sprendimai, saugumo įvykių įrašų stebėjimai ir analizai. Ir taip pat pristatysim ciklo metu mažiau, sakykime, rinkoje, dar lietuviškoje rinkoje įsitvirtinančius sprendimus, tokius kaip UEBA, vartotojų elgsenos analitikos sprendimai, galutinių vietų atsako ir aptikimo sprendimai EDR, NDR, XDR ir kitos technologijos. Iš tikrųjų, žiūrint į realius incidentus, kai išorinis įsilaužėlis patenka į vidinius organizacijos tinklus, tai didelio skirtumo nebelieka, jis pradeda atrodyti kaip insideris, dažniausiai naudojamos vogtos paskyros, legalūs kredencialai, slaptažodžiai, naudojami tie patys administravimo įrankiai, kaip RDP klientai, SSH klientai, ir šitoj vietoje aptikti įsilaužėlį klasikiniam priemonėm, tokiom kaip antivirusai, smėliadėžės ir ugnesnės, tampa praktiškai neįmanoma. Reikia labiau pažangių sprendimų orientuotų į vidinės grėsmes. Tai džiaugiuosi šiandien galėdamas pristatyti vieną iš dviejų turbūt geriausių pasaulyje UEBA tipo sprendimų, tai yra vartotojų elgsenos ir sistemų elgsenos analitikos sprendimai. Ir čia pristatom gamintoją Exabeam. Iš tikrųjų, Exabeam savo verslo modelį pradėjo nuo UEBA tipo sprendimų kūrimo. Ir jeigu pažiūrėti, kas dedasi rinkoje paskutinius kelis metus pasauliniai rinkai, tai mes turėjom pakankamai aiškiai atskirtus gamintojus, kurie specializavosi daugelį metų į SIEM tipų sprendimus, ir inovatyvius gamintojus, kurie vystė būtent UEBA, pavadintą UEBA kategoriją saugumo sprendimus, elgsenos ir analitikus. Tai norėčiau trumpai sukurti vieną tokią trumpą apklausėlę, kurioje galbūt jūs pasidalintumėt, ką naudojate jūs, ir trumpesnį galbūt gautumėm įžvalgą į tai, kas rinkai populiaru. Ir tokia trumpa apklausėlė visiems, paprašysiu užpildyti, tai kaip valdote saugumo žurnalinius įrašus, galbūt nenaudojate centralizuoto žurnalinių įrašų kaupimo, tai yra pirmas atsakymas. Antrame, galbūt renkate žurnalinius įrašus centralizuotai, bet ne SIEM įrankių pagalba, tai galbūt SOC serveriai, tiesiog big data duomenų kaupimo sprendimai. Trečias atsakymas tiem, kas centralizuoti, naudoja SIEM tipo sprendimus. Ketvirtas atsakymas tiems, kas naudoja SIEM tipo sprendimus ir papildomai išplečia jų funkcionalumą, naudodami web funkcionalumą, kurį dažniausiai siūlo SIEM gamintojai. Ir penkta tema, apie ką mes šiandien daugiau kalbame, tai apie specializuotus web gamintojus, tokius kaip Exabeam. Kas dedasi rinkoje? Rinkoje iš tikrųjų tos technologijos po truputį SIEM ir webas apsijungia. Tai web gamintojai turi ir SIEM tipo savybių, SIEM gamintojai pradeda turėti ir web tipo savybių, bet tai žiūrėti iš kiekvienos pusės atskirai. Tai kiekvienas stipresnis toj pusėje, kurioje jie specializuojasi. Nematau, kiek čia liko iki mūsų apklausėlės pabaigos, bet matau, kad aktyvumo nebėra, tai stabdom tą trumpą apklausėlę, pasižiūrėsim rezultatus. Tikiuosi rezultatus matom ir apie pusę apklausos dalyvių pažymėjo atsakymą apie 40%, kada dar žurnalinių įvykių centralizuotai nevaldo, tai yra, jie yra galutinėse sistemose. Apie 10%, 10% respondentų atsakė, kad renka įrašus centralizuotai, bet nenaudoja SIEM tipo sprendimų, analitikos papildomus ir kitų turbūt dalykų. Ir vienas iš didžiausių atsakymų irgi trečdalis atsakė, kad naudoja SIEM tipo sprendimus, tai vėlgi labai smagu girdėti, nes turbūt dėl to žmonės čia ir prisijungia šiandien į šitą seminarą. Taip pat, kaip matyti, grinai elgsenos analitikų sprendimai, ką ir minėjau, mūsų bent jau lietuviškoje rinkoje, kuri neatspindi galbūt pasaulinės rinkos tendencijų, specializuoti sprendimai vis dar yra naujovė ir dar pakankama naujiena. Tai ačiū visiems atsakiusiems, panašių iš tikrųjų atsakymų ir tikėjausi. Tai grįžime prie skaidrių. Kalbant apie SIEM sprendimus, kaip klasikinius sprendimus, tai vėlgi jie dauguma yra orientuoti į grėsmių aptikimą, į dažniausiai naudojamas koreliacijos taisyklės, kaip įprastai. Aišku, dabar yra ir daugiau technologijų aplipdyta prie šių sprendimų, bet galim panagrinėti vieną iš tokių paprastų klasikinių atvejų. Tai yra, turim pranešimą, kad yra slaptažodžių purškimo ataka, rizikos lygis pakankamai aukštas ir vienu atveju tai gali būti, kad iš tikrųjų tai yra ataka ir kažkas bando, taip vadinkim, purkšti slaptažodžius, tai reiškia su vienu slaptažodžiu atakuoja didelį kiekį paskyrų, tikėdamas sėkmingo rezultato ir tai gali būti realios atakos įrodymas, tačiau gali būti ir situacija, kurioje, matydami šitą pranešimą, nėra jokios atakos. Kaip pavyzdys, jeigu mes paimsim didelę organizaciją, turinčią kelis tūkstančius darbo vietų, tai gali būti tiesiog klaidingas suveikimas. Galbūt darbuotojai atėjo 8-9 ryte ir bando jungtis prie savo kompiuterinių darbo vietų ir jiems natūraliai posykį nepavyko teisingai įvesti slaptažodžio, kadangi vartotojų daug, tai nėra jokia ataka, tai šitoje vietoje mes turim dvi galimybės. Pirma galimybė turbūt modifikuoti koreliacijos taisyklę, pritaikyti organizacijos dydžiui specifikai, kad jin duotų kuo mažiau klaidingų suveikimų. Antras kelias, ką dažnai tenka ir saugumo analitikam daryti, tai yra aiškintis kontekstą. Tai yra, iš kiek tų skirtingų kompiuterių buvo surinkti pranešimai prieš sugeneruojant šitą įvykį, ar tie kompiuteriai prijungti prie organizacijos domeno, kokie vartotojai prisiloginę prie šitų kompiuterių prisijungę buvo tuo metu. Ir galbūt, kaip minėjau, galbūt tai yra tiesiog natūraliai organizacijos elgsena, organizacijos tinkluose ir elgsena, kuomet ar po pietų pertraukos, ar tiesiog darbuotojams nepavyko to padaryti sėkmingai ir tame nėra jokios grėsmės. Ir šitoje vietoje atsiranda labai aiškus poreikis elgsenos ir analitikos sprendimams, tai yra nustatyti organizacijos bazinę liniją, baseliningą vadinasi. Vėlgi tai yra individualu kiekvienai organizacijai, nes visos įmonės ir organizacijos šia prasme yra skirtingos. Kitą pavyzdį irgi vėl galėtumėm panalizuoti tiesiog įrašą, saugumo įrašą ar logą, kuris vėlgi be didesnio konteksto mums neduoda atsakyti, kas vyksta organizacijos tinkle. Tai iš įvykio ID 4624 ir prisijungimo tipo 10 tipo galim spręsti, kad tai yra RDP sesija. Vėlgi tai RDP sesija į serverį, tai vienas SRV1. Vėlgi šitą įvykį mums sunku interpretuoti, nes yra naudojamas standartinis administravimo įrankis, RDP klientas, ir mums yra sudėtinga atsakyti, ar tai yra normali IT operacijų elgsena kasdienė, ar tai yra įsilaužėlio galbūt ženklai ir pėdsakai. Ir šitoje vietoje iš tikrųjų kaip reikalinga daug konteksto atsakyti, kas tas serveris, nes dažnu atveju organizacijose ne visada iš serverių pavadinimo aišku, kokia funkcija ir kokie servisai ir kokia veiklos rolė vykdoma tose serveriuose, ar tai aplikacijų serveriai, ar duomenų bazių, ar tai pašto serveriai, ar atsakinių kopijų serveriai panašiai. Saugumo analitikai vėlgi, kad spręsti, reikia atsakyti daug klausimų. Ne tik kokia serverio rolė, bet kokia serverio operacinė sistema, ar kokio kritiškumo serveris yra, ar serveris yra pasiekiamas iš interneto, ar turi interneto prieigą, kokie kiti įvykiai susiję su šituo serveriu, kokie vartotojai galbūt įprastai dirba su šituo serveriu ir panašiai. Ir turim vartotoją, Julietą Donaldson, kuri jungiasi prie šito serverio, šitos sistemos vėlgi, kad atsakyti, ar čia iš tikrųjų Julieta jungiasi, ar čia jungiasi įsilaužėlis, pavogęs jos kredencialus, reikalingas kontekstas. Tai yra ir kas ta Julieta, kokiam organizaciniam skyriuje dirba, kokios jos pareigos, kokioms Active Directory grupėms priklauso, kokie kiti dalykai susiję, elgsenos dalykai susiję. Ir šitoje vietoje vartotojų elgsenos ir analitikos sprendimai, kuo jie elgiasi skirtingai, priešingai nei SIEM tipo sprendimai, kurie orientuoti į grėsmės aptikimą konkrečios. UEBA sprendimai yra labiau orientuoti į būtent vartotojų ir asetų arba sistemų elgsenos analitiką, stebėjimą bazinių dalykų, kas yra įprasta, kas nauja, kas yra normalu. Ir šitoje vietoje atsiskiria šitas technologijas ir įprastai SIEM tipo sprendimai, jie licenzijuojami beveik visų daugumos gamintojų, būtent ir yra per įvykius logus, tai yra kiek EPS arba įvykių per sekundę gali sistema priimti, arba kiek tų įvykių gali išsaugoti gigabaitais ar terabaitais, dažniausiai už tai ir yra mokama. Vartotojų elgsenos analitikos sprendimuose dažniausiai licenzijavimas vyksta būtent per vartotojų kiekį ir per sistemų kiekį. Tai, sakykime, tie būtent licenzijavimo galbūt modeliai aiškiausiai ir parodo tą takoskyrą technologinę tarp šitų sprendimų. Ir apie tai šiandien daugiau papasakos Tapio Väärämäki, Exabeam ir jūsų portfolio. Tapio, welcome.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. Kestutis, I believe you went through just some of the like key concepts of what we are going to talk about today. So you went obviously through some of the like security events you are able to see and detect, for example, in logs from some of the sources. And I believe what you just explained was kind of giving a bit of indication that why reading the raw logs and the kind of raw information might be a little bit challenging, especially in the larger scale. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. I believe that to repeat the most important things, it's always a good idea. So don't hesitate.
Yeah. So I saw also a poll. May I ask what were the poll questions? What did people respond? I saw the results, but I was not sure about the questions.
The response was that about 40% of respondents don't collect logs centrally or don't manage them centrally. About 10% respondents told that they collect logs centrally but not using CM type solutions. 35% of respondents use CM solutions to manage logs centrally. About 15% of respondents use CM solutions and extend them with a user entity behavior analytic functionality from CM vendor. And 0% respondents use pure user entity behavioral solutions from dedicated vendors like Exabeam. So
Okay.
It's quite new and I believe important for respondents. So
Yep. So in next 45 minutes, what we are gonna mainly talk about is exactly what's the kind of the added benefit and what's the added value you as a defender and as an organization can receive for applying and utilizing UEBA. And I think this information or this poll is very useful for adjusting the approach we are having today. So what we are generally gonna talk about a little bit more is like what kind of pain points and challenges we are seeing at the security operations centers, and why there are those challenges. And from the challenges we move to kind of way of understanding the events and the information. So we move from the challenges to something we call time to answer, time to respond, time to good. So it's like measures that security analysts are taking at the SOCs, and from there when we understand that what kind of information and what kind of actions we are taking over there in the SOCs, and what kind of information we need to answer and respond to possible and detections and security events, we move to a concept of XDR, which you might have heard from many of the other vendors as well. And then we kind of wrap up and conclude the session by putting together that how Exabeam approaches this and how Exabeam applies user behavior and entity analytics on top of all this. And let's start by going through the SOC pain points. So there's the survey results you are seeing here. They are taken from a report called State of the SOC 2020. It's a research report that is released annually by Exabeam. And what they are doing in that report, Exabeam runs a survey to a number of end customer organizations. And last year they had 295 attendees in the survey. And in this survey, we are asking, there are questions asked like that, okay, could you explain me that what have been the main pain points you are encountering and seeing at your SOC? And the responding organizations, they indicate those challenges from 3 different organizational levels. So there's a CIO/CISO answering, representing green color over here. We have the head of SOCs or SOC managers, the line managers, and they are indicated with the blue color. And then we have the frontline employees, the analysts, who are with the purple color. And we can see that if we take from the analyst perspective, we are seeing a lot of challenge with the what comes to the kind of experience level of our employees. And that's very understandable because having a SOC is a relatively new thing, especially in Europe, especially among the small and mid-sized organizations, even among the large organizations. And it's very difficult to get experienced people. We need to train them. We need to educate them. We need to provide them with the skill set. Also, the set of tools organizations are using for defense, they are changing. So there's a lot of need for educating people. There's a lot of pain on documentation and reporting. So always when we detect something, and as a part of the good practices we are running at the threat detection and incident response, we should, document what we are doing, what we have seen, and then if someday we need to go back in time and understand what happened on that particular date when we saw a security event, we need to have some proof, some evidence is available, because that's gonna help us to understand if this is, for example, something we have seen before, or if this is a completely new event that is taking place. We are seeing that there are plenty of outdated systems and applications, which requires, of course, patching. They can have a lot of security holes. They are vulnerable. We are seeing, and then if we move to a little bit more like to the tool side and the security tools, we can see that there's a lot of pain, especially among the frontline employees, among the analysts, within complexity of tools. That can mean that we have too many tools. The tools are difficult to use. It takes a lot of time to learn and kind of ramp up our knowledge to use these tools. And again, that might be a challenge. There might be too many false positives or just noise. So we are seeing a lot of data, like Kestutis showed in the beginning. We might have a lot of logs available, but how can I identify what is the real or the what is relevant information to me as an organization to keep my network clean? And what is just a common noise that I should not pay attention? That can be seen as an issue for many of the organizations. Lack of visibility. We are not seeing everything we would like to see. Too many false negatives. We might not detect everything. We just might flag that this is good, even though it might not be. And alert fatigue, which means that there's too much alerts coming. We are not able to necessarily process all the alerts we are receiving every day. And then, of course, if I'm starting to skip and pass some of the alerts because lack of time, that means that we might miss some potential breaches, some potential attacks, and that's bad. And we can move on with the list and the survey, and these things get less and less relevant over the time. But here, this gives us a little bit indication that what kind of challenges many of the SOCs are struggling struggling with right now. And then if we drill down into more like technical part, so we have some information about or some more specific questions about the technology related issues that SOCs are encountering. So keeping up with the security alerts, that is definitely something we saw here also, too many false positives, alert fatigue. So that's a big issue. We are getting too many alerts, and that's bad. And a lot of organizations are, by the way, trying to now overcome this challenge by implementing SOAR solutions, security orchestration and automated response solutions. We're going to talk more about SOAR later today. We definitely see a big issue between coordinating and sharing information between the IT and cybersecurity teams in the organizations. Again, we are seeing the complexity as a big issue, and outdated equipment, poor performance of security tools, long deployment times, logging costs, and this just kind of, enforces the messaging we already saw on the first slide, that there's quite some challenge, and a lot of organizations feels these certain areas quite problematic. And then if we think about a normal day of analysts and when they are working with the incidents, we might start, getting a bit more context and details over here with this slide. So whenever our organization sees an event, someone might ask us that it could be related to this event, or it might be even an alert, and it might be, a message signal coming from an external organization that they are warning us that, okay, by the way, we saw some malicious traffic originating from your organization, from your network, and maybe it's good to verify it. So it might be also, someone from the management asking us a question. And no matter if we are answering or if we are having an event alert or a question from management, we need to be able to answer, or we are often required and asked to answer to questions that regarding this event. What was the asset involved? What's the device that has been involved with that particular event? Who's the person who was involved? Who's the user? What are the accounts? The accounts that are connected and associated with some privileges. What were the accounts involved? Why did this event happen? What did happen before this event, or before, during, and after? Is this normal behavior? Or is this deviating from our baseline, from what we are normally seeing in our organization? Are there any other accounts involved? And this is the kind of, first question. So then if we are seeing something, let's say, this is not normal, it's a deviation, it's actually a security alert, we have detected security malicious event or behavior over here, then it means that we need to respond. And then we would, instead of talking about time to answer to these questions, we would start talking about something called TTR, time to response. And when we have done our response and mitigated the possible issue, we might start talking about returning back to normal. And that would be TTG, time to good. And this is the cycle that the log is the process cycle that the SOC is working, every day for every single event. And some of the, when we see these events and if we detect it's bad, yes, then we need to prioritize and triage the alert. We need to assign the case for someone, do the initial response, investigate more, and then do the final response. And if that's known bad that we are immediately able to detect, okay, this is a phishing email. We are not even letting the user to read it. We just currently the email immediately or filter it out. Then that means that there comes an alert, but instead of assigning that necessarily to anyone, we just do the initial and the final response. We filter the email and we let the user name that, okay, DM is the user. We have logged an email because that was categorized as a phishing email. If you believe this is a valid email, please let us know and we will release it. And then, if it's something a bit more unusual, let's say that we are seeing a lot of weird PowerShell behavior, obfuscated PowerShell taking place on the user device, or process execution on the other devices, or maybe a lot of mounting of hard drives that we are not normally seeing done by that user, then it might require more investigation, more human interaction. And the reason why we are seeing these pain points over here, it's partially because of the fact that a lot of organizations, they are having a lot of problems and challenges to answer these questions in timely, consistent, and complete way. They might be able to answer some of the questions, they might be able to answer all these questions, but it just might take a lot of time. And we might not find out every single detail. And just to give you a bit of indication what kind of items we might be talking about over here, there's some of the examples that we might be talking about. So let's zoom in a little bit. So what must an analyst answer? We might start from the very basic level things. For example, okay, there's an event. Okay, I can see the screen jumping a little bit. Let's try to stay still. So for example, we might focus over here. Okay, I cannot move my mouse or it's moving the window. So let's look at the green box. So we can start from the device specific details. Who owns this asset? What is installed on that device? Is it a business role? Is it a managed device? Is it an unmanaged device? When have we seen this before? Who's the user behind that device? So just, getting this information together can be a very cumbersome exercise if we don't have a single system where all that information is stored. We might look at this blue box over here, directory services and HR. We might have a lot of questions about the specific user, such as who is this user, what is their status, what's the role of that user, how does that user behave in comparison to some of the peer colleagues in the same department in the organization? What privileges does this user have? What are the user groups he or she belongs to? Have we seen this user connecting to these servers or devices before? And when we are investigating a possible security or possible attack, a security event, all these questions are very relevant and important to understand if we are seeing something unusual or if this is just a normal behavior. And let's try to move the window again. So let's take one more box over here. Yeah, we look at this light green box over here, processes. So if there is a process running, we might ask that, okay, is this an authorized process? Is this something we normally see? Is this something we wanna run in this organization? What's the purpose of running that process? Does it belong to an application, to an operating system? Have we seen this before? What is the file hash? Do we want to run a signature check? What's the kind of role of that process? Is it associated to some possibly malicious behavior? I saw in the question box that there was something, someone mentioned MITRE over there, the MITRE attack framework. And we definitely can see if the process has any characteristics or if that has something to do with the behavior of like if that has characteristics of any TTPs, MITRE TTPs, and we have a slide related to that later in the presentation, so we can talk a bit more about MITRE later on. But the idea of this slide is to give you just a little bit like indication that what kind of things we might need to work with and what kind of questions we might need to answer if there's a security event that requires a more detailed investigation. And then if we think about how can, if this is very problematic, all these things we just went through, and we saw all these questions and this information we need to collect, we need to answer. The question is, of course, that, okay, how could we make this easier? How could we support organizations to work better with the security events they are seeing every day? And Gartner has come with the concept of XDR a few years ago. And this concept of XDR comes from the words extended detection and response, which means integration of multiple security products into a cohesive security operation system that unifies all licensed components. And the idea with the XDR is that, okay, we have a set of tools and we want to make those tools work together. And for past 15 to 20 years, CMs have been that tool to, collect that information, analyze that information, and make findings and do analysis on that information. But the challenge of the CMs has been that they are quite complicated. You need to work with the correlation rules, and those rules are not necessarily easy to maintain, easy to create. And if you need to search for information, you might see that, okay, running a single query with correct questions, that may take me 5 minutes. That might take me 10 minutes or maybe 2 minutes. But the challenge is that in order to answer a single question, or not a single question, but a list of questions regarding a single event, this might require me, let's say, 2 hours of time. And those 2 hours are not a problem as long I have enough 2-hour time slots available. But the problem is that if we have 2 or 3 people working in our security team, looking after these events and trying to keep our networks clean, the problems start taking place at the moment when we are running out of working time. So if we are getting 10 events per day and we need to spend 2 hours on every event, we need to have 20 human hours every day or working hours available every day to process those events. If we don't have, we need to skip some of the events. We are not going to be able to process them completely. We need to leave some untouched, or we need to try to triage and prioritize that, okay, what's going to be relevant. If there's less of those or if we have that time available, we are good to go. And the other pain point we saw coming out or popping up in the survey was the fact that, okay, SOCs have quite many tools. And the idea of XDR is to put these tools together so we still have those tools. But the idea is that let's make the use of those tools a bit easier, a bit more feasible for the people working with these tools. One of the challenges is also the fact that security is lacking a lot of standards. A lot of things are done in proprietary way, which means that, if I learn how to do things with Fortinet, I might not know how to do it with Palo. If I learn how to do it with Palo, I might miss out the Sentinel-1. If I know how to do it with Sentinel-1, I might not know how to do it with Microsoft. If I know how to do it with Microsoft, I might not know it with Proofpoint. And then it's very complicated to train all our users. We remember that there's a lot of lack of experienced staff. So this might be problematic for us. If we have a lot of tools, we remember the tools are complex. And I think we saw also in the technology part that there was like too many tools. Let's see. Too many security tools or consoles. And combining too many tools to complex tools and having not enough experienced people working on those tools, that's a difficult combination. And of course, if the security tools are running in the silos, which means that we have some of the part of the information on this particular tool and then some of the other parts of the information, these things that we were looking at here, they are residing, the information resides on the other tool. It means that I again need to start logging into, and that makes my operations slow. And the idea of the XDR is to put these tools together and make them work together and give you all the information and the actions you need to make your defenses operational. The idea of the XDR is to make these all things work together. And we can start, the XDR consists of 3 different or distinct components or verticals. So at the front line, we have the sensors, our security tools. They can be your EDR tools, they can be your network security tools, or not even necessarily security tools. They can be whatever is collecting information, having visibility, providing you visibility into that particular domain of IT. And we might have, just to mention some of the tools, we might have these EDR tools, firewalls, let's say CASB tools, DLP tools, emails related tools, security tools. We might have IAM related tools. And these are really our eyes and hands to the network. They are seeing what is happening in different parts of our environment and our organization. And if we need to take actions, these are also the tools that are used to carry out those actions. Then we have the backend system, which refers to all the engines we have running in the background. All these engines, all these sensors, and we are collecting that information into one single place, or maybe multiple places, but then we need to somehow have a full visibility to those different data lakes we are having. We might have a correlation engine where we are correlating information, maybe we are normalizing the data. We are maybe having analytics engine, it can be a UEBA or something else. Maybe we are applying machine learning, AI, whatever is interesting for our organization and makes us able to operationalize the data. And then we have the SOC workflows, the threat detection, incident response workflows, the case management workflow, the incident management workflow, the engine for that. We have our processes, and then we might have our automation engines. And these engines or the automation refers to ways how we automate things. And then the third component of the XDR is the content, which refers to detection rules, the ways how we might model the data. These rules and models are the analytics capabilities we are having in we are having for the data we are collecting here, and we are processing over here. So the content part, it gives us, it helps us to understand the data that we are collecting and what kind of things we might be looking from that data. That might refer to incident checklists. So whenever something happens, and if that's a phishing incident, if that's a lateral movement case, or whatever is the category of the incident, we can have a pre-made checklists and action flows that help us to process things when we are seeing this particular type of content coming. And we can have watch lists. So that might mean that, okay, if we have this type of specific type of devices, we are treating them differently, as if the device is a mobile and fully managed device. And then we might also have content. So we talk about automation. So the idea of the content automation over here is that we might have, like, content, how to run the automation, the guidance for running the automation when we are seeing something that requires actions. And there's two different type of XDR approaches or concepts seen in the market. One is something we could call as a native XDR, and that refers to a concept where all these three elements come from the same security vendor. And the idea is that, yes, they are fully integrated to each other. They are, in that respect, also easy to deploy. But the downside that come with that approach is, of course, the fact that then you need to purchase all the solutions from that same single vendor. You have the vendor lock-in. You might not have necessarily the most suitable tools for all solution areas for your organization, but the benefit is that they are readily integrated and sometimes almost like out of the box. They probably still need some configuration, some adjustments, but with the native XDR, you are having these things integrated with each other. And then you have an open XDR, where the idea is that maybe some of these elements might come from the same vendor, but then some of the other elements are from the other vendor, and you have a platform to put these together. You can mix and match, you can choose the most suitable, the most interesting, the best performing solution for your organization, and then your XDR platform that helps to integrate and make these individual sensors to work together. And this open XDR is the word where Exabeam resides. So Exabeam can provide you this part of this backend, and Exabeam can provide you this content part, but Exabeam is really living from the data coming from other sensors. Exabeam does not provide firewalls. Exabeam does not provide, they don't manufacture EDR tools, not the IAM tools. Exabeam needs other sensors to collect that data. All this data we saw over here, that must come from somewhere. But what Exabeam can do, it will automatically answer to most of these questions. It will automatically model this data and make it very easily available for your security teams. Kestutis, we have 8 minutes to go. How do you want to spend the rest of the seminar? We can pivot into a little demo if you like. People can see how this actually works. I think we might have some questions. So what do you think? What's your thoughts? What's the best way?
Yeah, we have 4 questions and and demo. So maybe let's start with the questions, and the rest of the time show us the short demo. Okay?
Yep. So that sounds good. So let's start with the questions, and then if we have time left, we show a little.
Okay, so you try to answer in short. Okay, so first question is from my side. So about UEBA XDR, 40% respondents said that they don't use any SIEM solution still. Mm-hmm. Do we need to have SIEM solution to use XDR UEBA technologies?
Yeah, so UEBA, it's a kind of a broad term. It's not necessarily kind of standardized. So some of the vendors, they might say that, okay, this is UEBA. They deploy an EDR agent and they monitor what is happening on the endpoint. And then I have seen an email vendor that says that, okay, we do UEBA. We learn how people send emails, how they receive emails, what's the size of the emails they are sending, if there's attachments, and they try to deviate. So generally UEBA means that you are somehow collecting data from the user or the device behavior, and you are modeling that data, and you try to detect unnormal things in that behavior. And the way how Exabeam does it is that we need to have the data somewhere. And we need to have data either in Exabeam's data lake, which is the log management module, or it can be in your other SIEM solution. It can be on your Splunk, on your Logarithm, on your Elasticsearch, whatever is the choice of platform. And then what we are doing these analytics on top of that data. We are putting all this information together like we saw. We are collecting as much of this information we can see, but this information must be somewhere. If you don't have your own SIEM, we can connect it directly, some of your security tools here. So there's multiple different ways of deploying it.
Okay, thanks for answer. So second question for Exabeam integrations with other IT security systems, mostly open source like Wazoo or SEC, Secure Onion, Elasticsearch, and so on. I shared in the chat window the integration list, so Elasticsearch is on the list. Not so many open source tools, I believe. Maybe a short comment.
Yep. So that's a very good question. So your UEBA tool, And, in order to answer all these questions and see all this data, we must be able to support as many different platforms as possible. And also, if we are not able to understand this data, if we are not able to onboard this data, we must have a way to onboard it. So what Exabeam is doing, there's a couple of different ways of bringing in the data to this advanced analytics. And if your tool of choice is not on the list, Kestuti is provided in the chat window, there's a link to a latest integration list. So you can always develop a new parser, or maybe, if it's a CSV file or a text file where the data is. There's different ways of reading it. So the list Kestuti is provided is just for currently available integrations. If your tool of choice is not there, it can be onboarded, and that list is leaving every month, every week. There's new vendors integrated, and if it's not there, either the vendor or you as a user organization can create the integration. It's not that complicated.
Okay, thanks. And another two good questions from Aurimas. First question about integration with MITRE ATT&CK framework. Can you correlate some alerts or incidents or what you see in Exabeam with MITRE ATT&CK framework?
That's a very, very good question, because the thing is that, again, if we go over here and if we think about the life before MITRE, the ways how our correlation rules, how our alerting, how they mainly worked was that, we are trying to, have a list of bad IP addresses. And then we are investigating that, is this given IP, is it on the list of bad IPs? If it is, then we know that this is bad. Or then maybe the same thing was done for the domains with the web filtering. So it was more or less signature-based detection. And then with the evolution of MITRE, we start approaching this a little bit differently. We start approaching that, let's go over here. We have these different phases of the attack. We have persistence, recon, we have lateral movement, discovery, CNC traffic, data exfiltration. And instead of trying to understand if this IP or if this file is good or bad, we try to, with MITRE, the idea is that, are we seeing behavior that might indicate or is associated with lateral movement? Are we seeing things that are normally seen with the command and control? And with these TTPs, these are tactics, techniques, and procedures. So it's not always so black and white. Sometimes it might be good behavior, even though it looks like data exfiltration. There might be a good reason for it. So it's not always that easy to say that, something is good or bad. But the way of thinking with MITRE is exactly the way how Exabeam works. And this with the Exabeam type of solution, it really helps you to operationalize MITRE framework. This is the way how, or we are looking exactly similar things over there.
Thanks. And last question, what is the benefits of the solution and how Exabeam differs from other UEBA solutions like Microsoft Azure, Sentinel, UEBA?
Yeah. So I think if we compare to Microsoft, I think Microsoft is very, very Microsoft related. So if we go back to this XDR part over here, so we spoke about two different XDR concepts. One is the native XDR, where all the tools come from the same vendors, and then you usually have certain vendor logins, and it's also usually maybe less content available for solutions from the other vendors. And I think that's a little bit the word where Microsoft is. If you have all the sensors from Microsoft and you have a lot of elements in your backend from them, also the content is quite feasible to deploy. But then if you are not a full Microsoft house, then I think you can start approaching this from the other direction. Exabeam provides you a lot of very good content. It integrates with a lot of things. There's a lot of good back-end engines available, and it does integrate with, pretty much with all the key players in the market. So I think this might be a little bit more open approach over here.
Okay, thanks. I don't know, Tapio, do you have 5 minutes for demo? Because it would be great to see it live.
Yeah, I have 5 minutes. So if other people are still available, we definitely can have a quick look at the demo.
Yeah, it's lunchtime, but for me it's interesting. So
okay, so what we are gonna do? The demo platform is a little bit slow this morning. So instead of doing the step-by-step demo, what I'm doing is that I have a pre-recorded video. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm back. Let's try it now. So now I can share again. So we share the full screen. I go into our video. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, and we have 5 minutes. The clock starts 1, 2, 3 now. So 5 minutes. Normally,
so
when we
about from an IoT perspective, this is
okay, let's take away the sound. So normally, when we are seeing some security incident, this is the way how it looks. We open the security incident. It could be like malware related incident, and then we start seeing some of the details associated to this particular malware. So we see that the file name is barbarian.jar. We see that it's establishing a CNC channel over here. We are seeing some particular details of that event. And then with a traditional log-based CM tools, what I would do next would be that I pivot into details of our particular event. So what we are seeing here is the data lake component where we have all the log data coming in from our sensors. And what we can see here is this same event and all the log details that we have available. And we can see that we are missing one of the key components or key information that I would need to have in order to analyze this particular incident. That's the username over here. We can see the source IP and the IP address, and we can see the host name, but we don't know who's the user behind this particular device, who's been the user, whose privileges have been on this particular device. And whenever we are analyzing and investigating a security event, we always need to answer those 3 questions. We need to answer what's the IP, what's the host, and what's the user. We are missing the user, so in order to understand, I start doing queries with this IP and with this host name, and we change these AND operators to OR so that we see as much behavior from that particular host and that particular IP. And we can see that, okay, there's been a user, Fredrik Weber, making a VPN login over there. And we can see that he's been using the that particular device, but the IP has been something else. And we want to include this username now in our searches. So that gives us a bit of indication who this user is about. And then we start running queries with these 3 parameters. And what I'm getting is a chronological representation of the different events, what we are seeing here. We see that, okay, there's a bin logon, which is a normal process. There are some web communications with the updates.microsoft.con. Also a conhost.exe, which is a normal Windows process. We see that there's a Windows event, authentication event. And generally what I'm doing here is like, trying to start creating a timeline of the events, what we are seeing over here. And I might even go to the processes and see that, okay, what's normal, what's, what we are seeing here, what we are not seeing normally. And this barbarian.jar is definitely one of those. And so is this bcdedit.exe. These are something we are not normally seeing in our organization. And that I can tell from my heart because I've been doing these analyses for past 3 years. So I definitely know what we are seeing normally, what we are not seeing normally. And the broader this particular event would be, the more time I would spend on collecting this information. And you can imagine if I was a junior level analyst, this would be quite challenging for me to collect all this information and try to understand what's normal, what's not normal, in order to justify from those logs and those log level raw data. That would be very, very that would require a SOC analyst with quite some experience. So what we are doing over here is that we go to that particular user and see if there's if he's shown on the notable user list. And we can see that this is the guy who we just saw, and we can see that there's a lot of risk points associated with this particular user. And if we go into this user's timeline, we start seeing this is a full timeline on that particular date since the moment of connecting to the corporate network, and what's been happening since then. And all this information we are seeing on this particular page is put together automatically, and we can see if we have seen this before, if this is normal for this user or our organization or maybe for this department. And we are also seeing, if we go forward a little bit because we are running out of time. So what we could see, for example, that we see first time connectivity from China for this organization. And we are giving 5 risk points for the user because normally we are not seeing this the first time connection we see originating from China. We see a lot of connectivity from other countries, but never from China before. And then we see this barbarian.jar over here, and we can see that there's certain characteristics that might point to facts that this might be unusual or bad behavior. And we see that it's the same user we just examined. And now what we are seeing is a much more human and security analyst friendly way of illustrating all this same information. And we see that it's doing certain suspicious behavior, like deleting the Windows shadow copies, which are the backup mechanism for recovering your machine to previous known good state. And this is all this information is provided to me in a very easily readable and quickly accessible way. And the system is giving me the risk points for the user or maybe the device based what is normal, what is good, what is bad. And of course, that's not the only source of truth. We also have a long list of rules and ways of triggering this data. But the good thing is that the data we are using and collecting over here, it's adapted to my organization and it's modeled so that we see exactly what are the normal amounts, what's the normal ways of having that data. And I think we actually used 2 extra minutes, but that's in a very quick time a demo that how from moving from that raw data, how we can move that into much more operationalized and actionable data.
So I believe we can finalize today. So I believe that's it, Tapio, for today. Ačiū visiems dalyvavusiems. Ačiū už kantrybę, kad iškentėt mūsų techninės nesklandumus. Ačiū, thank you, Tapio. Ir tikiuosi iki pasimatymo kituose webinaruose mūsų. Iki.